one. Good morning. This is Darrell Gunter, your host for Leadership on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSOU.net. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a real treat today because we have one of the industry leading experts on intellectual capital, Mr. Leif Edvinsson, as our studio guest. Leif, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we're speaking to you from Sweden, correct?
Yes, I'm sitting in the archipelago in south of Sweden, which is a remarkable place with a history going back 800 years.
Wow.
And then the Vikings were landing here and were starting to build villages.
Wow. Great history. If we could you share with our audience a little bit about your vast education and background?
Yes, I usually tell my colleagues as a professor in Lund that I was educated in Sweden at the University of Lund, but I learned to think in California at Berkeley. And this leads to a question for the audience. Where did you learn to think? Because it might be different from where you learn to do the traditional studies. And it's becoming more and more important for the future to be on the edge of tomorrow. And I think the big lack in training in our schooling system is related to this, that we have been learning to program 1 + 1 = 2, but perhaps it's not 2, it's 11, or it might be even more. And if you start to see that the educational system for our thinking could be extended and revitalized a lot. And this is what Leonardo da Vinci and Darrell and I just noticed, that we have something in common with Leonardo da Vinci, and that is that all three of us are left-handed. And then you can ask if that is good or bad. I think it's good. It has helped me a lot. I'm using both hands. So I'm playing tennis with my left hand and thinking with my right hand. So this is a little bit of a background, and you can read between the lines that I was educated in Sweden and in Berkeley, and I became professor in Sweden and became also professor in Hong Kong and Xi'an in China on this subject of intellectual capital.
Wow. For our audience, we're doing this series on intellectual capital. Could you provide us with how you would define intellectual capital?
Very good question, because there are a multitude of distinctions and probably not yet a refined definition. My view of it is, among others, that it is a derived head value, which means that you are extracting the most important value in an enterprise or in a society or a country or in your family. But it might also be the hidden values. So if you look around in your neighborhood or in your village or in your society, where do you have the major intangible and often hidden value? And this hidden value might be the most important, especially of the culture, for example. And this hidden value is usually in between people. It's not in the people. So therefore, structural capital is in between people, either as relationships or programs or trademarks or other labels for it. And this in-between dimension might be the most tricky one, but also the most multiplying one. So therefore, intellectual capital is not an asset. It's a kind of a moving target of growing value if you cultivate it.
That's very interesting when you said the relationship between human beings, and that's where the magic happens. Could you? This is the first You know, I've been talking to quite a few folks about intellectual capital. You're the first one that talks about the value between structural between two individuals to increase the value. Could you expound on that a little bit more?
Certainly, the learning which I was discovering by looking for the hidden values in Scandia many decades ago was actually to visualize that space in between. And we used at that time a very simple device, and that was a video camera, to show to the colleagues that this has value, and let's learn how to use it. Let's learn how we can multiply it. So the distinction emerged that there are three major components of intellectual capital: human capital, which means you or me, the relational capital, which is in between, and if you're skilled enough, you can turn either of those or both into something that is sustainable. And this sustainable dimension is structural capital. It could be trademarks, as I mentioned. It could be patents. It could be intellectual property laws, etc. But the point is that structural capital is working 24 hours a day for you. Human capital can work at best 6 hours a day. The rest is downtime. So therefore, you have a multiplier effect in productivity of structural capital that is 400% more than the human capital. So why don't you use it?
Wow. Wow. That is very,
yeah, that's it.
wow. Okay. And so you talked about some of the key principles of intellectual capital, human capital, structural capital, and what about relationships with your companies or your customers?
Well, the customers are temporary, as you know. They're temps in a way.
Right, right.
And they might be there, but they might not be there tomorrow. So therefore, you have to look for sustainable value streams.
Yes.
And that is often very intangible. And it is in the deal making around these streams. And one company that has been very successful in developing that is Spotify. So Spotify actually turned these value streams into a scalable system around the globe. And that is intangible capital or intellectual capital. As I said, you realize that the head value is not in the tape or in the music tape or whatever you have. It is actually in the relationship using the system.
Right.
And then you can charge for that.
Right. Exactly. 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 You know, it's interesting you should mention Spotify, because I believe they came after Pandora, but they're far more successful than Pandora. And it's something very unique you just said, is that it's the relationship that the user has with Spotify that they find that has that intrinsic value for them.
And you mentioned also the customer. When we were working with this, that we said that the customer is important, but the most important is probably the customer tomorrow, which means the customer of tomorrow. The customer, the potential customer,
yes,
the prospect.
Right.
Which means that you are moving the target from looking at the customer of today to the customer of tomorrow, or even further. And that is sometimes called prospect. And that's where you today see the stock market evaluation of companies. What's the prospect revenues? And then you're coming to your question, which is you have to develop the legal system, which I think Spotify has been better than Pandora and some of the other ones in developing the legal framework, the network of deals, which means that you could say that perhaps Spotify is legal innovations as well as technology innovations.
Wow. Okay. So let's before we jumped on to the interview, you had said something that kind of blew my mind. You said, Darrell, what is it that you want to achieve with this interview? Let's talk about the future and then work backwards.
Yeah,
So let's do that.
we have just touched upon it. It's about sustainability.
Mhm.
You know, you can easily kill your customer, but it's much harder to kill your prospect of tomorrow, or the other way around, that the prospect of tomorrow will kill you. So therefore, you have to develop a kind of early warning system of learning to read the signals of tomorrow. And we developed for that a device which we called future navigation. So we developed a navigator for that with different dimensions. And we also developed a future center as a lab for learning to read around the corner. And that is extremely fascinating. And this has to do with my education from California and learning with people in Silicon Valley and other places there, that the issue might be that you have to train not your handwriting, not train your running quicker, but your way of thinking and perceiving signals. And where do you perceive the signals? Well, it's usually done by your PFC. And the PFC is your prefrontal cortex. And in other cultures, it's called the third eye. So you have an eye between your traditional eyes, which is the third eye. And that links back to intellectual capital, which is short for IC.
Wow.
So what do you see? Darrell, do you see something?
No, this conversation is really blowing my mind because I'm identifying with what you're saying, and I teach professional sales at Seton Hall University, and I'm thinking about, boy, am I teaching my students correctly to think?
Look into that, and I did a little test with my students in Lund some years back. I gave them an assignment to read China Daily in English for a week, and then share with me what you see there. And that trained them a little bit in using other material, other documents to pick up signals about the development of China. It could, of course, be other medias, etc. But it was very easy accessible online, and you could get it in English, and you could have it as a conversation piece. Test it.
In the book is called China
Daily.
China Daily, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you find it on the net, chinadaily.com. It's one of the magazines that is officially approved in China. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't matter. That's not the point. It's the point actually to see what they are reporting and how aware are you of that.
Right.
And that's why awareness might be one of the first dimensions, which we touched upon some minutes ago. The space in between. Are you aware of that?
The space.
And how do you cultivate it? Space in between.
Yes.
And how do you cultivate it? What kind of approach do you have for it? And we were in our future center, we were working with smell. Smell.
Yes.
What's the smell of future?
Ah, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Mr. Leif Edvinsson, who is blowing my mind as we're talking about intellectual capital, but the power of thinking and being aware of where your customer, who your prospect where they will be in the future so that you can de-risk your business, if you will, by understanding, by seeing where they are. Something you said earlier, Leif, is something that I've always tried to adhere to. Don't know if I achieved it all the time, was to always try to see the light around the bend, if you will, being able to see around the corner before I get to the corner. And I believe that's what we're talking about here with IC.
And for that purpose, we developed this Scandia Future Center, which you can read about on the net. And this Future Center is a kind of embodiment of as a laboratory for the structural capital. And in that structural capital, you pose the human capital.
Right.
And you pose people you have recruited, but you also pose people as prospects.
Yes, 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 yes. And so when we think about intellectual capital and the traditional balance sheet, in your opinion, is IC represented on the balance sheets of companies today?
Mostly not. Mostly it is something that accountants don't like. And accountants don't want to have it because it's a kind of a hidden reserve. So therefore, SEC in Washington almost 30 years ago said that it's illegal not to report it. And now we have the same lawmaking in Europe, because if you are building a kind of business which has one image, that is the visible one, but the invisible one, which is usually 8 times or 10 times larger, is not in the annual report. It's not in the balance sheet, and it's not in the profit and loss statement. And then when you start to work on these dimensions, you realize that intellectual capital might be a liability instead of an asset. And your leadership responsibility is to take care of that liability. Otherwise, you are drowning the shareholders.
We can look at traditional situations like Kodak that,
yes.
that had digital technology in-house, but they chose not to leverage it because they did not want to disrupt their traditional film business.
The same happened in France a year ago, roughly, or 2 years ago. Pasteur Institute, which was the first one in the world to develop vaccine 100 years ago. And they developed a COVID vaccine that was almost ready for releasing. But then the scientists started to fight internally. So the management board decided to close down the whole project. Think how many millions of people who had suffered from this decision.
Wow. Wow.
Liability.
Liability. Wow.
And in that case, it was based on culture.
Yes, 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 yes.
Leadership culture. So you're in your work, you are right on the track of leadership navigation. And a little story on leadership, which I think you might be aware of, is that leadership comes from the Vikings. They had one navigating Viking standing in front of the ship with a stone to check that it was free water for your going into the shore. And that was leadership.
Wow. Wow.
Leading the ship.
Leading the ship.
And most society leaders of today are gatekeepers instead of navigators.
Wow. I have a question for you. The show Vikings, which has international success, from your perspective, how accurate was it?
It's too much dramatized.
Too much drama.
But yes, but we have to accept the drama because it might give some learning. It's like Sound of Music with a little bit of sugar in the spoon. You take the medicine.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Wow, leadership, lead the ship. Wow,
Yes.
There you go.
So think about that in your education. Lead the students.
Yes.
Through and when you have covered China Daily as a kind of case reading, go over to Fast Company and ask them to read Fast Company.
Yes, 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 yes.
And as the story is remarkable because Alan Weber and his colleagues were coming from Harvard Business Review and were assigned to start a company with quicker cycling of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And that became Fast Company.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. I tell you,
yes,
there's so much knowledge in this world. It's you know, I consider myself to be an avid reader, but every day I'm just learning new things.
Me too.
What?
And conversations like this one is very good cultivation of your mind.
Yes, 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 yes. So Areopa has established the intellectual asset banking model, utilizing intellectual capital to help companies fund growth. In your opinion, how will this intellectual asset banking change the way that companies receive funding?
In many ways, if we start on the national society level, if we go back to what I said 10 minutes ago, you have a major proportion of the value outside the balance sheet. And that goes for society as well, which means that only those who are operating with a limited amount of insights are probably not so correct in their navigation. And we see that in a lot of cases. But the future is actually to learn to pick up these intangibles and handle them correctly and for the growth, not for me, but for the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do you develop these hidden assets, relationships, and structural capital and culture with a benefit for perhaps not the next generation, but 7 generations down the road?
Yes, yes, yes. That's
And Areopa is just starting the process from their viewpoint with the asset banking. But the more intriguing leadership dimension is probably in the liability.
mm-hmm.
And the liability is related to what you don't know that you don't know.
Right, 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 right.
And how large is that space? Huge.
You are the first person that I've heard in the I guess I've been at this now for a year and beginning to understand intellectual capital. For years, I've always worked in the information industry with the knowledge management space. So I see the direct correlation between the two. But you're the first person that talked about the liability of, you know, that's the part of the 4 levels of consciousness where you don't know what you don't know. The unconscious,
And perhaps you have seen the research on this. And there is even a book called Ignorance Management. Ignorance Management, which is written by a late professor from Austria called Ursula Schneider. And she did a remarkably good pedagogical handling of this subject. And we tried with our Future Center to treat it. And for example, if you take the keyboard of your mobile, you have a certain standard there called QWERTY.
Yes.
And why was this standard developed? It was developed roughly 120 years ago to reduce the speed of writing. Yes, because the arms, the mechanical arms with the letters were jamming into typewriter. So therefore they decided to have a standard called QWERTY to reduce speed of writing.
Wow. Fascinating.
Ignorance management.
You know, it's interesting when I was in high school back in the 60s. Early 70s. My sister said to me, you need to take typing. Now this is 1971 or 72 or something like that. I'm sorry, when was I? 73, it was 73. And I didn't realize that taking that typing course would serve me so well because of course, you know, computers and the keys on the phone. Fascinating.
I did the same. So you're using all 5 fingers, right?
Yes. Yes.
But still, it could be much more rapid if you change it to the modern neuroscience insights.
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, we're going to have you back on the program because we're running out of time, and I have many more questions about IC. Well, there's some bit. You know what? I've taken so many notes. Oh boy! But what are some of the things that a business leader should do to begin their education about IC, intellectual capital?
Start by looking for what you don't know. Be humble to those signals, and then invite people from other generations to broaden your perspective. So we did that when we designed the Future Center. We had young architects, we had middle-aged architects, and we had senior architects to give us different perspectives, and that worked very well. And we do the same today in a project with the Netherlands on positive storytelling, positive cartography of the future. Because I'm not going to be there, but the youngsters are, but we could combine our eyes. So we have 6 eyes on the topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is so simple, actually, to do. You can do it in the board of directors. You can do it in the management team. You can do it with customers. Look for the cross-generational possibilities.
Cross-generational possibilities. Wow.
Yeah, that's the future.
And so
it's a multiplier.
Yes.
So it's a different mathematical logic. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 11.
Yes. And so, Leif, are you still lecturing?
Yes.
And how can one get in touch with you if they would like for you to lecture? Because I think your schedule could be very busy if you wanted it to be.
Yes, but that's why I'm working together with Areopa and see if we can multiply my possibilities and insights with your colleagues. And otherwise, go to leifedvinsson@gmail.com and send me a note, and then we can get up on Skype or some other channel, Zoom or whatever. We need to learn from Leonardo da Vinci to stretch out your arms.
Yes.
And he was very good in this explorations and experimentation. And we need to do the same. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful with the environmental perspectives.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Mr. Leif Edvinsson, who is the intellectual capital guru, savant, if you will. Leif, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. And I think what I observed today, and this is an early signal for you as well, that the interest for intellectual capital is larger and deeper in Asia than in Western part of the world. And what will that mean for the future?
Right. Yes.
So that's why I got the professorship in Hong Kong as well as in Xi'an, to be combined with the one in Sweden.
Wow.
So usually I send you a greeting from the future and say, happy future.
Excellent. Final word is very excellent. So Leif, thank you for coming on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up this week on Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter. And this was about the future. So we want you to have a great weekend. But remember, leadership begins with you. WSOU 89.5 FM.